Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about all things eyeshadow. There's a common theme among the people that I talk to when it comes to makeup. So many of my family and friends always tell me that they don't know how to do eyeshadow, or that's the one area that they're just not so confident in. So I wanted to sit down and film a dedicated video showing you guys how to do a very easy and foolproof eyeshadow routine. This technique that I'm going to show you can be used with all sorts of different eyeshadow colors. I'm going to be showing you in more neutral colors today just because I feel like that's what most people wear. But I'm really excited about this video because I'm going to be focusing just on the eyes. So we're going to go super in depth with everything that I can possibly tell you about eyeshadow. And I hope that it will help you guys at home feel more confident when you're doing your own eyeshadow. So let's get right into it. I already have my brows done. I did that off camera. Today I used the Thrive Cosmetics brow pencil. And now it's time to prep the eyelids. If you're just learning how to do eyeshadow, I personally would recommend doing your eyeshadow first before your face makeup, just because sometimes there's a little bit of fallout that can happen. And if you do your eyes first, it's way easier to clean up any mistakes that you might have made. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Even though the eye look's going to be very simple, I want to start with my eyes first. I'm going to go ahead and prep the eyelid with some concealer. This is the Laura Mercier Flawless Fusion Concealer, and I'm just going to put a little bit on the eyelids. I like to use concealer first because it helps to cancel out any discoloration that I might have on the eyelids, and it just creates a really nice clean base for your eyeshadow application. So I'm just buffing this out with a Morphe M173 brush, and I'm just making sure to buff this out all the way toward the end of the brow. And I also like to make sure to get a little bit of concealer right in here. A lot of us have a little bit of discoloration there, and adding concealer right here before applying eyeshadow just really helps to brighten up the eye area, and it creates a really, really nice seamless canvas. All right, so the next step is to set the concealer on the eyelids. A lot of people these days are going straight into eyeshadow over a tacky base. I feel like that's something that maybe you could try out down the road if you're interested in it, but for me personally, I find that when I set the eyelid and create a nice powdery finish, I'm able to blend out my eyeshadows really nicely, and it also allows me to build up the color instead of it being too intense, which can sometimes happen when you just apply the eyeshadow right on top of a cream base. So I'm going to go into my Sigma Soft Blend Concealer brush. If you guys have watched my videos, you've seen this in pretty much every tutorial, and I like to make sure that there are no creases on the eyelid before I go ahead and lock in that concealer. Any sort of translucent powder will work for this. The one I'm using is from Lawless, but I use all different kinds of powders to do this. It honestly just depends on what powder I'm using for the rest of the makeup look. Honestly, you can use whatever you want. All right, now it's time to actually apply the eyeshadow. Now that everything's nice and prepped, we're ready to go in with some eyeshadows. I thought I would use this palette in today's video because I feel like most of you may have it, and if you don't have this exact palette, you probably own colors that are similar to what I'm going to be using today. This is the Anastasia Modern Renaissance palette. This is well loved by me. I love this so much. This first step is optional considering that we've already prepped the lids pretty well, but I'm going to show you anyways just in case. You can totally skip this step if you want to save some time, but sometimes I like to go into Tempera, which is a really nice ivory colored shadow, and sometimes I just like to do a light wash of a color like this because I just feel like it further preps the eyelid, and it will help the other shadows that we're going to use blend over top of what we just laid down, since it's all the same formula, if that makes sense. Again, that's completely optional. You could just totally start with the step I'm going to show you right now, and that step is to go into a transition shade. That's how I always start all of my eye looks. For today's look, I'm going to go into Golden Ochre. I'm choosing this shade because it's just slightly darker than my skin tone. Another thing that looks really good in the crease if you don't have an eyeshadow palette is just to use whatever bronzer you use, because I feel like bronzers typically are about 1 to 2 shades darker than your skin tone. So if you don't have a shade like this in your palette, just dip into your bronzer. But I'm going to take the shade Golden Ochre with the brush from the Balm. I will have all these brushes linked down below for you guys. I like to tap off the extra, and I like to start in the crease, and I'm kind of buffing back and forth, and I'm being really, really light-handed with this. And I like to go back and forth in windshield wiper motions, and then sometimes I will even take the brush and kind of buff it out once I feel like there's less product on the brush. The key to achieving really nice eyeshadow is to just layer in super light layers, because not only will that help with the blending and the final look, but it also prevents you from going overboard. It is always much easier to keep layering and adding product than it is to remove product. And that goes for makeup application in general, whether you're doing your face, your lips, your brows, whatever it is, especially if you're not familiar with what you like, or if you're not familiar with applying eyeshadow at all. Just take your time, don't rush it, and work in small layers. That always helps. I'm going to do the same thing to this eye. And if you're not sure where your crease is, sometimes you can just nestle the brush right above your eye, and it will kind of sink in right where the darkest parts of the eyeshadow should be. Everyone's eye shape is different, so that's something that you really want to pay attention to. This technique will work on all different eye shapes, but if you have more deep set eyes, it might be very obvious where your crease is. And if you have more hooded eyes like me, that trick really helps to just find it and figure out where your eyeshadow should be placed. And you may notice that I'm not really dipping back into the eyeshadow pan that often. I spend a lot of time buffing and blending. When in doubt, blend it out. That is always the best way to make sure that your eyeshadow looks super seamless and just really nice at the end. You want to really make sure that you're taking your time to buff and blend. So there's that for now. Okay, next we're going to add a little bit more definition. So I'm going to go into this shade right here called Warm Taupe, and I'm taking this on a Morphe M433 brush. I'm going to tap off the extra. And I'm going to explain this to you while I do it, but I kind of like to lift my brow up a little bit, and I imagine the line that would move up from here toward the end of my brow, and I kind of start to apply the shadow across the lash line in that manner, just to add a little bit of depth there. I always want to keep most of the product close to the lash line, and then once I feel like the brush has a little bit less product, I personally like to run a little bit through the crease just to further intensify the shape of the eye there. And again, I'm working in light layers. As you can see, that's not that much product right now, but it's so easy to just add more and keep buffing and blending until you get to the intensity that you want. I feel like while you're doing your eyeshadow, it's also really important to just trust the process. I feel like oftentimes people rush the eyeshadow application and they'll just dip right into a dark color and start applying it all over the lid. And if you're familiar with doing eyeshadow, I feel like that could work for you. But if you're just starting out, I think it's really important to just take your time and practice and build the color up. Otherwise, you're going to get easily frustrated and things just aren't going to look the way that you planned. So as you can see, I'm continuing to build this up. And again, I like to just take a little bit and drag it through the crease just to add a little bit more depth. For me and for my eye shape, I like to layer this outer corner up pretty heavy just to create that dimension. But again, just adjust this to your personal preferences and also what you think looks best depending on what your eye shape is. Do the same on this eye. I like to just buff it on this outer corner, and I really try to get it into the lash line so that when I open my eyes, you can really see the color right there. As you work in your layers, it's good to step back and take a look at both eyes so you can kind of see if one eye looks balanced and the other one needs a little bit more product. Don't forget to step back and look at a larger mirror versus just doing one eye in a small mirror and then another eye in a small mirror and then not stepping back and seeing the whole thing all together. If for some reason you feel like you went too heavy or things are looking muddy, I will show you one of my favorite tricks. I'm not saying that I dislike how this looks, but I'm just going to show you. Think of translucent powder as an eraser in this situation, especially if you've already prepped your eyeshadow with powder. This is gonna work way better, but if you just take a fluffy brush with some translucent powder and you start to buff it over the area that you feel like you may have made a little bit of a mistake, it essentially starts to erase it. It's not gonna get rid of everything completely, but it definitely tones it down and it will help you blend that out a little bit more. I'm gonna add some more color back to where we just erased because obviously I want more depth than that, but I thought I would share that tip with you as well, just in case you feel like you went a little heavy-handed. Also, something that I learned, and I don't always do this because it's something that you have to kind of practice, but if you hold your brush toward the end of the handle, automatically it gives you a little bit of a lighter touch, and that's going to allow you to layer up the eyeshadows even better versus going in right here, you're gonna really pack on the eyeshadow. And I guess if you want a more extreme color, like sometimes I will grab the brush here to really pack color on, but if you're trying to buff and blend, hold it toward the end, and that will really help you keep that light touch. My overall goal is to keep the darker colors toward the outer portion of the eye, and then as you move inward, that's where you add your lighter colors. That's really the most foolproof tip when it comes to choosing colors for your eye look. If you always remember to focus the darker colors on the outside, and if you also keep the majority of the pigment towards the lash line on the outer corner, it's gonna look good no matter what. All right, so now we're gonna go into a shimmer shadow. I'm gonna choose this one right here called Primavera, and to be honest, I always love to apply shimmer shades with my finger. I'm just gonna take this on my ring finger, and since we wanna keep the light shadows on the inner corner, I'm gonna really start by applying that shadow right on the inner corner, and then I'm gonna blend it out toward the center of the eye. Once you get toward the center, just kind of lightly brush the shimmer over top of the existing shadows there. And don't worry if it goes too far over top, you can always correct it by going back in with this darker color after. I'll show you how to do that in just a second. So same thing on this eye, I'm just going to apply a little bit of shimmer. You could apply shimmer with a brush if you want to. I just find that most shimmer shades work best either being applied with your finger or with a wet brush. And I'm just going to continue to build this up until I get the intensity that I want. And I like to mostly intensify it toward the very inner corner, and then once there's less product on my finger, I like to blend it out toward the middle. I'm going to take the brush that we were using with the shade out here, and I'm not even going to apply any more shadow, but what I am going to do is I'm going to kind of buff over this outer third here just to make sure that everything looks nice and blended. So there's that. So easy, right? Again, you can totally do this with different colors. Just keep the whole like transition shade, outer corner and crease shade, and then the lighter shade in this inner corner in mind as you choose your colors. But this technique will work with any color that you want to use. If you step back and really like the depth of what you've created, you could totally just leave it like this. If for some reason you want to amp it up a little bit, or if you really like definition along the lash line, you could either apply an eyeliner, or you could use a deeper eyeshadow to kind of create even more depth really close to the lash line. I'm going to show you how I like to do that. And I'm going to take both Raw Sienna and Cypress Umber on a Morphe 456 brush. And again, I'm going to tap off the extra, and I'm going to really focus this right along the outer corner of the lower lash line. And I'm just going to keep layering this until I get the intensity that I want. It's really not that much more, but I feel like it really does make a difference with the entire look by just adding that little bit of depth along the lash line. I'm not somebody who really is into eyeliner on a daily basis. I know so many people really can't live without it, so if that's the case for you, go ahead and apply eyeliner at this step. You just want to make sure that the eyeliner is the thinnest toward the inner corner. Once you hit the iris, you can make a thicker line all the way toward the end or wing it out by following the natural line of your lower lash line up toward your brow. That's kind of how you would map out your eyeliner. Let me know if you want to see a more in-depth tutorial on eyeliner. Again, it's not something that I personally choose to wear all the time, but I could totally film something for you if you want to see a more in-depth tutorial on that. Something that I forgot to mention is it's really important to clean your eyeshadow brushes between use, especially when you dip into different colors or use them for different things. That will help your eyeshadow not look too muddy, because if there's a previous color on the brush already and I go into something else and start to blend, the previous color is going to mix with the new color and it can create just not as good of a look. So I like to use the Sephora Daily Brush Cleaner for that, and I just have like a little washcloth or a paper towel right next to me when I'm filming. You just spray a little onto the towel and then buff your brush into it, and it takes away any eyeshadow that's on it. So I will have this link down below as well. If you want a really quick brush cleaner, this is way easier than trying to like shampoo your brushes all the time, which of course you should do every once in a while, but this is a really great way to just clean your brushes between different colors. All right, so I really like how that looks. Now I'm going to go ahead and clean up any fallout underneath the eyes. This is the beauty of doing your eyeshadow first, is that anything that fell out underneath the eyes can be wiped away. And if you buffed a little too heavily down this way, you can always clean it up, which is always super nice. So what I like to do is take my finger and just put the wipe around it, and I kind of follow this lower lash line toward the end of my brow to create a nice lifted shape. I don't want a super harsh line though, so I like to take my finger and press that into the skin just so that we get the shape there, but it's not a harsh line. Same thing on this eye. Alright, so this is the part where I do my base. Since this is just focusing on eyeshadow, I'm going to speed through this. I'm going to do primer, foundation, concealer, and powder, and then I will meet you back here to do the lower lash line and finish the eye look. So I'm just realizing as I'm applying the foundation that I wanted to tell you one more thing. While you apply foundation, try to get as close to the eyeshadow line as possible without wiping that away, just because you don't want to wipe away all of your hard work, but you also don't want a distinct line right underneath that has no foundation or concealer on it, if that makes sense. So if you're choosing to wear a foundation, especially if it's more full coverage, just keep that in mind. All right, so I've just applied my foundation, concealer, and powder, and I always like to jump back into eyes at this point because I still have a really blank canvas, and I just feel like completing the eyes first kind of helps me map out the rest of the makeup look. So I'm going to take a smaller brush. This is the Morphe M506 brush. It's just a little bit smaller, but it's still fluffy, so it's going to be perfect for the lower lash line. I'm going to follow the exact same order of the colors that we used before. So I'm going to start by dipping into golden ochre, which was our transition shade on the top. I always like to use a transition shade on the lower lash line as well, just because I feel like it also helps the lower lash line blend into the rest of your foundation underneath the eye as well. So I like to just take a little bit of whatever transition shade I used. If you used bronzer, use bronzer. And I like to buff this across the entire lower lash line. And I do buff this lower than all the other shadows because I personally like a really nice smoked out lower lash line. My eyelashes on my lower lash line are pretty long, so I kind of use that as a guideline, I guess. After I put mascara on, I kind of like the eyeshadow to be just a little bit shorter than my lashes, if that makes sense. It will all come together in the end, so you'll be able to see what I'm talking about once I put mascara on. But that's kind of the reference that I follow when it comes to the transition shade and how far down I should bring the eyeshadow. Next, we're gonna add a little bit of definition, and I'm just gonna take the same brush and dip into warm taupe. I do use the same brush for certain things, but you wanna make sure that you're going from lightest shadow to darkest shadow, because if you take this and dip it into a dark shadow and then you try to apply a light shadow with the same brush, it's gonna really mess up the look. So if you do use the same brush for something, which I do, I always use the same brush for a lot of things, just remember to use the lightest to darkest shades. And a little trick I like to do is to take whatever brush I'm using and pinch it, and then voila, you have a different brush shape. And it helps you get a little bit more precise along that lower lash line. I'm starting to add definition right up next to the lashes, and then as I get less product on the brush, you can kind of buff it down a little bit, but I'm keeping this focused on the outer portion, and then I'm stopping it about halfway across, like right underneath the pupils where I'm gonna stop that. Again, work in light layers just to really slowly build. And I also like to make sure that I'm connecting the depth of the outer corner on the lower lash line with the shadow that we have going on here. So I'll just take that same brush and just buff everything out so that it's nice and seamless. This is one of those moments where you just kind of have to trust the process. Once mascara is added, everything makes sense. So don't get too scared at this step in your makeup. Everything kind of looks funny, especially if you don't have bronzer, blush, highlighter on yet. You just have to be patient, work in small layers, and just, yeah, trust the process. Just know that everything will come together in the end. It all works out. Okay, I'm just gonna do the same thing on this eye. Again, making sure that all of this is nice and blended right here. All right, now I'm gonna take a smaller brush and dip into Primavera. I'm gonna tap off the extra, and I'm gonna start to build this up on the inner portion of the eye. I'm basically just mimicking everything that we have going on in the top lid. We're doing the same lightest to darkest on the lower lash line, just on a smaller scale, obviously, to fit the lower lash line. And same thing here, we're just gonna really build up the product, having most of the pigment right in this inner corner, and then once there's less on the brush, I like to drag it until about halfway to meet the existing eyeshadows that we already have on the lower lash line. So I normally wait to do this, but since we're just doing an eyeshadow tutorial today, I'm going to show you right now. One of my favorite steps in applying eyeshadow is to highlight the inner corner. I always like to use whatever highlight I'm going to use on the face. I have this one right here. This is from Anastasia. It's the Amrezy highlighter. I'm going to take that same brush and I'm going to pop this highlighter in the inner corner of the eye. This makes such a difference in the end result of your makeup look. Just look at the difference between the eye that I've highlighted and the eye that I haven't. I also like to take whatever's left on the brush and just pop a little highlighter right underneath the highest point of the brow bone. I'm gonna try to avoid this blemish right here because I don't want to highlight that, but I always like to add a little bit of highlighter there as well, and that just completes the look in my opinion. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply highlighter to this inner corner and then also to the brow bone. And you can also kind of bring it in right here along the lower lash line, and you can blend it into the existing shadow on the eyelid, especially if you have a light shimmery shade like this, or if it's similar to your highlighter color, then feel free to just kind of blend that all together, just like that. All right, let's apply mascara, my favorite part. I'm gonna use the CoverGirl Exhibitionist mascara today, and I'm going to apply 2 to 3 coats to the top and bottom lashes. And I know this is an eyeshadow tutorial, but I guess I will share a couple mascara tips. I like to kind of apply the brush right at the root, and I blink into the brush first, and then I kind of move in back and forth motions with my brush just to kind of help the mascara separate the lashes. And for the lower lashes, I just lightly touch it onto the lashes and kind of wiggle it back and forth, focusing most of the product at the root of the lashes to add that extra definition. All right, you guys, that's the eyes with the mascara on. I'm gonna go ahead and finish up the rest of the face, and then I will share my final tips with you at the end. All right, so I just finished up my makeup, and there's a couple other things I wanted to tell you about. If for some reason you got any mascara marks on your eyelid, whatever you do, do not lick your finger and try to wipe it off. It will will ruin the eyeshadow underneath. So instead, just wait for it to dry and then take a brush and you can just buff that right away and it will come off super easily. So there you have it, you guys. There is my foolproof eyeshadow technique. I hope you guys found this helpful. I really tried to cover everything that I knew. If you guys have questions that I didn't answer through the video, please comment them down below and I will be happy to answer them. Let me know if there's any other categories that you want to see an in-depth tutorial with. I love making these kinds of videos and I love teaching you guys everything that I know. So I really hope you found this video helpful. Again, you can use this with any sort of colors. If you're first starting out, start with more neutral colors and just figure the technique out, and then you can move into deeper tones, a smoky eye, you can play with color, and you can do all of that using the exact same technique, just switching out the colors. If you're new here, hi, my name is Allie and I would love for you to join the family. You can do so by hitting the subscribe button. If you're already a subscriber but you want to be notified on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays when I upload, click on the bell after you subscribe and you'll get a notification every single time I post. Thanks again for watching, you guys. I hope you have an amazing day wherever you are, and I will see you in my next video. Love you. Bye!